Chapter 7. AMILIUS. Adam and Eve. AMILIUS of Atlantis, AMILIUS the first man. When the morning stars sang together, a group of souls entered the earth led by AMILIUS, a former incarnation of Jesus, according to the readings of Edgar Cayce. The spiritual purpose, in every age, of this group of souls, was to lead others back to the kingdom of the Father. In the beginning, AMILIUS was androgynous, with the male and female polarity in one. According to Edgar Cayce, 5749 series. When there was in the beginning of man's advent into the plane known as the earth, and he became a living soul, amenable to the laws that governed the plane itself. The Son of Man entered the earth as the first man, the Son of Man, the Son of God, the Son of the first cause making manifest in a material body. And again, from the readings given to Thomas Ugru, author of There is a River. Should the reason for creation be given as God's desire to experience himself? God's desire for companionship? God's desire for expression? God's desire for companionship and expression. The second problem concerns that which is variously called evil, darkness, negation, sin. Should it be said that this condition existed as a necessary element of creation, and the soul, given free will, found itself with the power to indulge in it, or lose itself in it? Or should it be said that this is a condition created by the activity of the soul itself? Should it be described as a state of consciousness, a gradual lack of awareness of self and self's relation to God? It is the condition of evil, the free will, and its losing itself in relationship to God. The third problem has to do with the fall of man. Should this be described as something which was inevitable in the destiny of souls, or something which God did not desire, but which he did not prevent once he had given free will? The problem here is to reconcile the omniscience of God and his knowledge of all things with the free will of the soul, and the soul's fall from grace. He did not prevent, once having given free will, the soul's fall from grace. For, he made the individual entities their souls in the beginning. For, the beginning of course, was in seeking expression of themselves outside of the plan or the way in which God had expressed same. Having given free will, then, though having the foreknowledge, through being omnipotent and omnipresent, it is only when the soul that is a portion of God chooses that God knows the end thereof. The fourth problem concerns man's tenancy on earth. Was it originally intended that souls remain out of earthly forms, in spiritual bodies, and were the races originated as a necessity? The earth and its manifestations were only the expression of God and, not necessarily as a place of tenancy for the souls of men, until man was created to meet the needs of existing conditions. In other readings, Edgar Cayce indicated that the earth was originally created for the animal kingdom, which is also a progressive kingdom, although we cannot be certain what the ultimate will be. From a scientific standpoint, we are aware that snakes evolve into bird forms. In the evolutionary pattern of life, all animal creation seems to be evolving. In a reading given a woman in Virginia Beach on her little dog, Edgar Cayce seemed to point out a state of evolution for the dog. It has been a lion at the time of the persecution of the Christians by Nero. In fact, it had been this woman's, Margot, favorite lion, and she had pampered it to the extent that it was a household pet. As lions were tamed in the Roman period, her husband, in this life, developed a great antipathy for the dog, and the reading indicated that in Rome, he had been one of those sacrificed in the arena. This tiny dog had been the very lion which attacked him. Various interpretations are given of this reading by individuals who study this, but since Margot had not one reading, but two life readings on her dog, it is very unlikely that Edgar Cayce was being facetious. A little Chihuahua dog, once a lion, has now evolved to the kingdom of dogdom, which is a long road in the point of evolution. Incidentally, in my own life, out of 11 dogs who are constantly with me, one is special. We seem to have known each other throughout the ages. In my most recent lifetime, in England, I was somewhat of a writer. Photography had just come in at the time that she acquired her dog. In every respect, in color, in stance, in expression, Taffy is that dog of long ago. He was taken on the bed of his mistress, and he turned in shocked surprise as the flash of the photographer startled him. Today, I have an exact duplicate of that pose. He is the same dog in every respect. Where is Taffy going? What is his own ultimate? I do not know, but with all animals, I believe that they have been with us in many lifetimes. It may be that those pets which are especially close to us were, even, a projection of some portion of us in the very beginning. And they will come to us, time and time again in our journey from incarnation to incarnation. From a study of the Edgar Cayce readings, it seems that there is a trend downward from early incarnations toward greater earthliness and less mentality. Then, there is a swing upward, accompanied by suffering, patience, and understanding. Is this the normal pattern which results in virtue and oneness with God obtained by free will and mind? It is the pattern as it is said in him. The sixth problem concerns interplanetary and intersystem dwelling between earthly lives. It was given through this source that the entity, Edgar Cayce, after the experiences Untitled, father of Zend, grandfather of Zoroaster, went to the system of Arcturus, and then returned to Earth. Does this indicate a usual or an unusual step in soul evolution? As indicated, or as has been indicated in other sources besides this as respecting this very problem. Arcturus is that which may be called the center of this universe, through which individuals pass, and at which period there comes the choice of the individual, as to whether it is to return to complete or continue its soul evolvement. That is, in this planetary system, our sun, the Earth Sun and its planetary system. Or to pass on to other systems. This was, for Untitled, an unusual step, and yet a usual one. Arcturus is the next port of call out of this solar system, or rather, when we have graduated from Earth experience, we may continue on in realms where it is not necessary to be clothed in a physical vehicle. Or we may choose to return to Earth. This is not unlike the Arhat, as given by the Buddha. Buddha in a discourse to his disciples, once stated that an Arhat may never behold the face of the Buddha, and yet, because of the love within his own heart, return again and again to Earth in order to leaven the whole. An Arcturian soul, as was Edgar Cayce, may choose to return to Earth for a special mission. Whether for one lifetime or for a series of lifetimes. Again, the old soul is seldom aware that he is an old soul, especially in youth. He may even be as a stranger in the earth. And karmically, the load may be a heavy one, because all karma is not met in early lifetimes. It is well to remember that an old soul, one who is approaching Arcturus, or one who has returned from Arcturus, is one who has come again and again into the earth. He is not an angel soul. That is a different system of involvement and evolvement altogether. He is one who is old in the wisdom of the heart. And one who, truly, is seeking to become a channel of expression for the will of the Father. The seventh problem concerns implications from the sixth problem. Is it necessary to finish the solar system cycle before going to other systems? Necessary to finish the solar cycle. According to Edgar Cayce, at the moment of death, we find ourselves out of the body, in a spiritual duplicate of ourselves. And we are drawn to the environs of that planet of which we are most a part. In his own life reading, Edgar Cayce traced the moment of death in a recent incarnation. For a moment, there was complete darkness. And then, he found himself in the environs of Uranus. For this, as well as Neptune, is the planet of the mystic. The one who has spent lifetimes in discovering the reason for life in the earth. In a similar reading for another individual, Edgar Cayce indicated that because this lifetime had been one of great loneliness, even in sleep, she was drawn to the realms of Venus, where there was complete love. Each time we are in deep sleep, we may, if we so choose, journey to other realms. In this sense, we are never separated from those we love. It is necessary, however, for us to complete our Earth journey in this solar cycle before going to other realms of experience, because we began the journey in the Earth in the solar system. It is as if we were born into one family. It would be impossible to change that family in a single incarnation. Neither can we change the pattern of our lives, which we, ourselves, created in the Earth. When we come to the point in love where we can accept all beings as a part of ourselves, then we are ready for Arcturus. There are some who have returned again and again. And in a sense, the earth is a prison house. There are others who have taken on the new environment, the new pattern, of Arcturus. For each soul, it will one day be a matter of choice. Can oneness be attained? Or the finish of evolution reached? On any system, or must it be in a particular one? Depending upon what system the entity has entered. It may be completed in any of the many systems. Here, apparently, Edgar Cayce is giving that after we have completed the sojourn and the purpose in this solar system, then we may go on to many other galaxies. In one reading, he even indicated that at some period, perhaps eons in the future, an evolved soul might even become an avatar or a leader of another planet. The journey ahead of us is, indeed, a very long one. And one filled with adventure. One filled with that which God has planned for each of us, even from the beginning. Must the solar cycle be finished on Earth, or can it be completed on another planet, or does each planet have a cycle of its own which must be finished? If it, life, is begun in the Earth, it must be finished in the Earth. The solar system of which the Earth is a part is only a portion of the whole. For, as indicated in the number of planets about the Earth, they are of one and the same. And they are relative one to another. It is the cycle of the whole system that is finished. This problem concerns the proper symbols or similes for the Master, the Christ. Should Jesus be described as the soul who first went through the cycle of earthly lives to attain perfection? Including perfection in the planetary lives, also? He should be. This is as the man, Jesus. So we see how the coming into the earth has been and is for the purpose of evolution or the evolving of the soul, unto its awareness of the effect of all influences in its experiences in the varied spheres of activity. And that only in him, who was the creator, the maker, the experiencer of mortality and spirit and soul could this be overcome. See John 1. 1-2. From John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him was life. And the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness. And the darkness comprehendeth it not. There was a man sent from God, whose name was John. The same came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all men through him might believe. He, John, was not that light, but was sent to bear witness to that light. That was the true light, which lighteth every man that cometh into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came unto his own, and his own received him not. But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name. Then, as there is prepared the way by those who have made and do make the channels for the entering in, there may come into the earth those influences that will save, regenerate, resuscitate, hold, if you please, the earth in its continued activity toward the proper understanding and proper relationships to that which is the making for the closer relationships to that which is in him, alone. Ye have seen it in Adam. Ye have heard it in Enoch. Ye have had it made known in Melchizedek, Joshua, Joseph and Jesus. Ye have seen his spirit in the leaders in all realms of activity, whether in the isles of the sea, the wilderness, the mountain, or in the various activities of every race, every color, every activity of that which has produced and does produce contention in the minds and hearts of those who dwell in the flesh. For what must be obliterated? Hate, prejudice, selfishness, backbiting, unkindness, anger, passion, and those things of the mire that are created in the activities of the sons of men. All power in heaven, in earth, is given to him who overcame. Hence, he is, of himself in space, in the force that impels through faith, through belief, in the individual entity. As a spirit entity. Hence, he is, not in a body in the earth, but he may come at will to him who wills to be one with, and acts in love, to make same possible. For, he shall come as ye have seen him go, in the body he occupied in Galilee. The body that he formed, that was crucified on the cross, that rose from the tomb that walked by the sea, that appeared to Simeon, that appeared to Philip, that appeared to even John. The above is, apparently, one of the few times that Edgar Cayce was taken over by another. And this would have been by John, the beloved. Appeared to even John would seem to mean appeared to who am, John, the beloved. For God so loved the world that he gave his Son. That is a pattern which each individual should emulate. He should so love his fellow man. For when we walk with him, in purpose and in ideal, ye will find that ye are never alone. Think not that ye or any other individual may be the only ones serving a living God. For since his entry into the world, and his making it possible for man to find his way back to God, there has been, and will continue to be, an increase. For God has not willed that any soul should perish. Though the light of hope may oft grow dim, in the violence that is created by those who become self-conscious of ability, and who use self and others for gratifying of selfish desires, let it ever be said of thee that ye will cause the welkin to ring for the glory of the coming of the Lord. For he will one day come again, and thou shalt see him as he is, even as thou hast seen in thy early sojourns, the glory of the day of the triumphal entry and the day of the crucifixing. And as ye also heard the angels proclaim, as ye have seen him go, so will ye see him come again. Thou wilt be among those in the earth when he comes again. Glory in that, but let it be rather the one reason why ye keep the faith. The faith in the coming of the Lord, to call those who have been faithful. That they, as he prayed, may be where I am, and may behold the glory which I had with thee before the worlds were. Edgar Cayce. AMILIUS, the way shower. For since his entry into the world, he has made it possible for man to find his way back to God. The story of creation is a difficult one to tell, as it involves many early civilizations, before man separated and became both male and female in polarity, before the existence of man and woman as separate entities. Lemuria, La, Da, and some of the civilizations as given by Edgar Cayce, which existed before Atlantis. These existed before man was completely entrapped in matter, or in a material form. If we would think of a child, for a moment, manipulating a toy doll, and being able to enter the doll, the automaton, at will, and to exit at will, we have a picture of a spiritual being involved with a body in which he was not entrapped. In a sense, it was a plaything. The world was imagination, creativity. But as man became more and more involved, we use man for lack of a better word. Actually, it was the involvement of androgynous beings in the earth and in the things of the earth. He became hopelessly imprisoned in flesh. It was then that AMILIUS entered and separated, becoming both male and female in form. Moreover, AMILIUS entered the 5 races simultaneously. All souls were created in the beginning. The entity who became the Christ, Jesus, was our elder brother, but more than this. We are a part of him, now and forever, for we are projections from his spirit. Even if we banish ourselves to the planet or plane of Saturn, which is very much as the Catholic Church chooses to describe purgatory, a place of cleansing, inevitably, somewhere, somehow, upon the skein of time, we must find our way back to him. No soul is ever lost. It has free will. It may choose to be separate for centuries, for eons. But eventually, as given by Krishna, we wend our way back to him, of whom we have been a portion, since the very beginning. We might think of AMILIUS, then, as a consciousness, as a spirit of light, who chose to enter the body, so that he might embrace physical flesh. So that he, with the other portion of his entity, the female polarity, Amelia, might create a channel for others to be born. It was to be a long climb back to the oneness which they knew in the beginning, because the souls had chosen to become very involved in matter. And evil had come into existence. When Edgar Cayce was asked in a reading the greatest sin in the earth, he gave selfishness. And again, spiritual vanity. Pride of spirit has long been a mark of this particular soul group, which chose to come into the earth in the very beginning. For many, this very lifetime has been a time of testing. Edgar Cayce gave in another reading that not one of these, who had come in the beginning with AMILIUS, would not feel the lash of the whip across the ego. But since he who suffers the most must learn the most, humility comes only through the crucifixion of the ego. In some lifetime, Whatever a man most loves must be taken from him, it would seem, so that he will learn, through suffering, the way back to the very source of his existence. The way back to the Christ, who came again and again and yet again, to point the way of release for each of us. Such a soul was AMILIUS, the light-bearer, that firstborn of the Father, who took upon himself the cross. In another reading Edgar Cayce gives, all souls in the beginning were one with the Father. The separation, or turning away, brought evil. Then, there became the necessity of the awareness of self's being out of accord with, or out of the realms of blessedness. And, as given of the Son, yet learned he obedience through the things which he suffered. Again, for the spirit of evil has not, did not, become manifested in matter. Only has it moved by or upon or through matter. Hence, as the process of time has moved in and through matter, there has come to man, in the finite mind, the consciousness of the indwelling of soul, spirit, body. For each soul must seek for its own development to the consciousness of being in accord with, and one with, that which is creative in its elemental as well as positive forces in its experience. Hence, whether in life as manifested in a material plane, in the body, or whether in the inter-between, out of body, that which has been and is the impelling influence for the consciousness of the individual, is the determining influence in that reaction, which that individual soul, that is a portion of the whole, is to become, whether it is to be one with, or separate from, for a time, its creative influence in its experience. In a sense, every individual in the earth is a part of the whole. We are a strange family, but each a part of the whole. Each created in the beginning. Each of us in our activity within and without the sphere of the earth has, at one time, been separate, or has separated itself from the Father. Thus, as with AMILIUS, there were to be many lifetimes in the earth until, once again, we find ourselves one with him. Edgar Cayce gave a number of readings to individuals who entered the consciousness of the earth at the time of AMILIUS. For someone who was close to him, he gave. Before that, the entity was among those when the forces of the universe came together, when upon the waters, there was the sound of the coming together of the sons of God. The morning stars sang together, and over the face of the waters, there was the voice of the glory of the coming of the plane for man's indwelling. In the very fine book by Jeffrey First on Edgar Cayce's story of Jesus, he has chosen from the many readings on AMILIUS the following. In that particular experience, there still were those who were physically entangled in the animal kingdom, with the appendages, with cloven hoofs, with 4 legs, with portions of trees, with tails, with scales, with those various things that thought forms had so indulged in as to separate the purpose of God's creation of man as man, not as animal. Edgar Cayce's Story of Jesus. Jeffrey First, Coward McCann Incorporated. New York. These were spiritual beings which were entrapped in matter. With cloven hoofs, 4 legs, portions of trees, scales, etc. It is as if an artist chose to paint monstrosities, and to become a part of these paintings, until one day he would find himself imprisoned in them. This has been a theme of stories from the earliest civilizations, because it is a memory pattern. It is a tale which is embedded in the deepest levels of our subconscious. It is a horror story which was created at the very beginning. It was that these beings might find release that AMILIUS, and a host of souls known as the sons of God, entered the earth plane. When the question was asked Edgar Cayce what was meant by the sons of the highest in Atlantis, and the second coming of souls to the earth, he answered, in this period or age, early Atlantis, as was seen. There is fault of words here to project that as actually occurs in the formation of that as comes about. There was, with the will of that as came into being through the correct channels, of that as created by the Creator, that of the continuing of the souls in its projection and projection. See? While in that as was of the offspring, of that as pushed itself into form to satisfy, gratify, that of the desire of that known as carnal forces of the senses, of those created, there continued to be the war one with another, and there were then, from the other sources, the continuing entering of those that would make for the keeping of the balance, as of the first purpose of the creative forces, as it magnifies itself in that given sphere of activity, of that had been given the ability to create with its own activity. See? And hence the second, or the continued entering of souls into that known as the Earth's plane during this period. This, again, is the story of those beings who were entrapped in matter, and of the entering of another group of souls, so that reincarnation in the earth might take place until they were freed from the cycle which they, themselves, created. Atlantis existed for some 200,000 years, and during this period, the physical body was more or less purified. But, as recently as 12,500 years ago in Egypt, there was still the necessity of purification. Our present body, unencumbered with scales, tails, appendages, did not come about in a moment of time. It was cleansed and purified over the ages. Thus, the entry of AMILIUS, who was androgynous, but who became male and female, so that man might find his way out of matter. When there was, in the beginning, a man's advent into the plane known as Earth, and it became a living soul, amenable to the laws that govern the plane itself as presented, the Son of Man entered the earth as the first man. Hence, the Son of Man, the Son of God, the Son of the first cause, making manifest in a material body. This was not the first spiritual influence, spiritual body, spiritual manifestation in the earth, but the first man. Flesh and blood. The first carnal house, the first body amenable to the laws of the plane in its position in the universe. For, the earth is only an atom in the universe of worlds. And man's development began through the laws of the generations in the earth. Thus the development, retardment, or the alterations in those positions in a material plane. And with error, sin, entered that is called death, which is only a transition through God's other door into that realm where the entity has builded in its manifestations as related to the knowledge and activity respecting the law of the universal influence. Hence, the development is through the planes of experience that an entity may become one with the first cause. Even as the angels that wait before the throne bring the access of the influence in the experience through the desires and activities of an entity or being, in whatever state, place, or plane of development the entity is passing. For, in the comprehension of no time, no space, no beginning, no end, there may be the glimpse of what simple transition or birth into the material is, as passing through the other door into another consciousness. Hence, as there came the development of that first entity of flesh and blood through the earth plane, he became, indeed, the Son. Through the things which he experienced in the varied planes, as the development came to the oneness with the position in that which man terms the triune. Edgar Cayce. Adam and Eve. The story of Adam and Eve is, according to Edgar Cayce, an actual account of those entities who became Jesus and Mary, the beloved mother. For each of us, however, it is a story of ourselves and of our own fall into matter, if we will accept it as such. As it is given in I Corinthians 15:22, as in Adam all die, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. In the beautiful booklet on Jesus published by the ARE Press, the author and compiler, Clifford P. Owens, has quoted from Edgar Cayce. When did the knowledge come to Jesus that he was to be the Savior of the world? When he fell in Eden. The story of Adam and Eve would seem to be the biblical one. The story of creation is given in Ezra's translation of the Book of Moses taken from Genesis reads, "And the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon Adam, and he slept. And God took from one of his ribs and closed the flesh thereof. And the rib which the Lord God had taken from man, made he a woman, and brought her unto the man." In the Hebrew, the word rib means side, and the word sleep means death or the little death. This would seem to be a symbolic legend of twin souls, those who are eternally one in the earth. As Edgar Cayce gave, they were one soul so far as the earth is concerned. And again, in the beginning, Mary was the twin soul of the Master in the entrance into the earth. As Eve, the feminine principle, failed Adam in the garden when she submitted to the tempter, so did Rama fail Sita in his disbelief of her, centuries later. Mary, the mother, was to question the Son's purposes at one time during his ministry. Yet, they had been together from the beginning, and they were one in spirit. Since twin souls share a like pattern in the earth, and since they are complements one to the other, Mary, in Atlantis, was surely one who entered as a world mother, as Zeta entered as an earth mother. She, too, had been a teacher of men. She, too, had represented the reality of love throughout the ages. Because she was the first to falter, if we can accept the story of creation in Genesis, her karmic load may have been heavier, in some respects, than his. She was, surely, the woman of sorrows of whom Jeshua wrote so vividly. And he, who had not known loyalty as Rama, turned to her with his whole heart. As the beloved wife of Zend, they were answers one to the other, as was Asenath to Joseph. And finally, Mary, beholding her son, the other portion of her entity, upon the cross, met within her own spirit the crucifixion that he knew, in body. The story of Adam and Eve is a story of those who will not be separated, either in the earth or beyond it. It is a story of an eternal love. One that was created in the beginning, and one that will always be. As Jesus and Mary were the pattern in the earth in all things, so were they the pattern where love is. For they are one in the earth, and they shall not be divided. It is my personal belief that there were many incarnations of Jesus and the beloved mother, Mary, throughout the ages. They were as complements one to the other. They were not that which would be termed parallel soul. Because it is so difficult for us to understand. At least it is for me. I did not mean to mention the projections of AMILIUS into 5 places in the earth. This would be, in effect, if Edgar Cayce is correct in his interpretation, 5 entities who were AMILIUS. This would also mean 5 entities who were Amelia. There are many folk tales of doubles in the earth. It is less easy to believe that there might be quadruples. Several years ago, after a period of several lectures in Rome, I went to Vesuvius. In our party was a Chinese man whose father was a great psychic in the Orient, as well as a mystic. Somehow, I was thrown with him all during the course of that day, and it would seem that he had strange dreams of other selves in the earth. He was so much like one whom I have known in this life, whom I shall call John, that it was unbelievable. A habit of walking with a hand thrust in his pocket. A quickness of speech. The same birth date. A marriage with 2 sons. A lifetime of seeking to serve others. Small idiosyncrasies which cannot be described here. As I listened to him, to the same voice inflection of John, I began to wonder about parallel souls for the first time. Sometimes there are marriages which are very close, where the 2 persons involved are like each other, rather than complements to each other. If Jesus, in all ways, is our pattern in the earth, could it be possible? And I ask you, for I do not know, that there are other selves. 4 other selves, in fact. Amelia, who became Eve, who finally became Mary, the beloved mother, would she not have 4 others of her same soul pattern? AMILIUS, the first man, who as Edgar Cayce said, in the same way as amoeba, separated, would he have 4 others? 4 parallel souls? For all eternity, he would be one with the other portion of his own spirit. The one who became Mary, who was first Amelia, then Eve. But, in reviewing the lifetimes of Jesus in the Akasha, there are others who come into his orbit again and again. John, the beloved, who was one Zoroaster, is one such entity. Was John a brother soul? Isis, the daughter of Ra, knew him in other embodiments. She was his mother more than once, his sister, his friend. Was she a sister soul, one of 4, of the one who was Amelia? In a sense, is not every person in the earth a brother soul, a sister soul of him? If we are corpuscles in the heart of God, as Edgar Cayce gave. If we are also projections from his very spirit. From the spirit of the Christ. So that we are closer than hands or feet, are we not eternally a portion of him? In writing this book, I have lost friends who were very close to me, because they choose to believe in the traditional manner that Jesus came, but once, then, and then alone. In Palestine. He chose to be born. Does it lessen his greatness if he came many times? Does it not enhance his love that he chose to seek embodiment in the earth again and again, and yet again? As Hermes, the Nubian. As the teacher of righteousness. The first teacher. And as Jeshua, who was called Jesus, Jesus is from the Greek Cayceus. Jeshua is Hebraic, his actual name. He was crucified. Jesus, too, was to die on the cross. As Jeshua, who became Deutero-Isaiah, who through the aid of Cyrus, the Persian, led his people out of captivity in Babylon, he was also to know a tragic death. Of the several Isaiahs, one of whom was sawn in two, it would seem to have been Jeshua. Apparently, the many tragic deaths suffered by Jesus in his lifetimes in the earth were chosen by him, even if they were of a karmic pattern. He chose, too, to return to the earth again and again. He was to know great loneliness and sorrow of heart. At any time, could he not have chosen to return to his Father? In those dark hours when he was tempted on the mount by the Shaitan within himself, by the angel of darkness, whether within or without, it was here that he attained, for all time, the Christhood. In the first temptation, when he was torn by hunger, he knew that it was a simple matter to turn the very rocks into bread. He had done this even in early life on a journey with Mary and Joseph. From the physical temptation, the desire to assuage his hunger, he turned away. In the second temptation, that of being born by angels, so that all men might recognize his kingship, he rebuked Satan. In the third temptation, to become the greatest of all rulers on the face of the earth, he gained the final victory. These were the personal temptations of Jesus. These were the areas in which he, himself, had once failed. The loneliness of Hermes, the Nubian, was such that he tended to overcompensate with food and drink. To the unconscious, food and drink are substitutes for love. Stars did not fall from their galaxies because even Hermes, great, kind, compassionate of heart, could scarcely bear the loneliness of his spirit at times, so that he turned for love, unconsciously, in foods. This temptation came only because it was a part of that which Jesus, himself, had experienced. He was one who was aware of good food, and that it could be used even to substitute for love. It was in this way that the Satan or Shaitan, within him, brought the first temptation. In the second temptation, he was meeting the pride of Rama, the pride of the Atlanteans, the pride of all of those who have known greatness in the earth. Once, in a lecture, Manly Palmer Hall said that only an occultist can know an occultist. Only a mystic can know a mystic. To others, these people seem strange, as if they are listening to music that is not of this world. Jesus was strange, in a sense, to those who knew him. They could not know him as he was, truly, because they had not yet reached that point in consciousness. They could only stand aside and criticize him. But to be born by the angels themselves, to descend from clouds of glory, then, he of the lonely heart, would be known. Before Atlantis, even before AMILIUS, he had once, seemingly, failed. Although failure is only a word that denotes that the lesson must be met again. Here, too, he turned from the temptation of vanity and pride. In the temptation where Satan offered him great power and glory, and these he had known as the spiritual king of the earth, even as Ram, he turned away. He knew the heart of Rama. He knew the aloneness of Rama and the mistakes that he had made, particularly in the 15 years of his bitterness, because he believed that Sita had betrayed his love. Only for an instant did he hesitate. These had been his weaknesses. Ram had conquered, and other people, even though that conquering was, for the most part, painless. There had been those who had been brought, forcefully, into subjection though, after he conquered Lanka, which became Ceylon. He knew of the karma of Joshua, the soul suffering which had begun thousands of years before at the time of Rama. Mary, too, met her own temptations during that final lifetime as his mother. She, too, as Sita, had known such pride of spirit that she could not bear to live in a world which knew that she had once been set aside by her husband. As Maria, the mother of Jeshua, a wife who was refused, she met that loneliness of spirit in much the same manner as Hermes. She turned to overindulgences in food. She also turned to a type of dramatic suffering, so that beneath the pain, there was a sense of near enjoyment. As Mary, the beloved mother, in the years after the crucifixion of Jesus, after she had seen her whole world crumble before her eyes, she turned not to material food, but to the spiritual food which Jesus had given to her in great measure. She, too, overcame the first temptation. In her latter days, she could have become a celebrity. She could have had the adulation of many. In choosing to remain with John, to whom Jesus had given her in that last dark hour upon the cross, she put aside all worldly temptations for power or glory. Instead, she turned to the Comforter, who did not leave her, who did not let her go. Of the many lives of Jesus in the earth, Mary was his eternal counterpart. There were several lifetimes, as with Melchizedek, when Mary chose to remain out of the body, acting as a guardian to him from the other spheres. They came into embodiment not once, but many times. Mary, in the Atlantean culture when women were of equal and like status to men, sometimes assumed the dominant role. Once, as the daughter of a king, she ruled. Again, as a high priestess in the Temple of Light, she brought the principle of the masculine-feminine polarity into the sacred literature of Atlantis. Centuries later, Ram brought this very teaching into the land that became India. Even in embodiments when the Mary portion of the entity did not even meet the Jesus portion, still they were not divided in the night life when the soul leaves the body. In the higher planes they were one. There is reason to believe that Jesus, in Atlantis, was once known as Quetzalcoatl during the last and final age. As the son of the high priest of the Temple of Sacred Wisdom, knowing full well that these teachings would be lost, except for India where Ram had taken them, he chose to leave Pisidia. The sacred calendar, as well as the sacred records, were then taken by him into the land that is now known as Yucatan. Again, he brought many with him, and he appeared as a young god to them. Unlike Ram, he did not choose to conquer these people, as Ram had conquered Ceylon. Instead, he journeyed from place to place telling his story of the one God. The Mayan calendar is the sacred calendar of Atlantis. In that embodiment Mary was not with him in any part of that lifetime in the physical body, but again, as a priestess in the Temple of the Sun, she knew of his work and prayed for him, daily. The Mayan people were to remember Quetzalcoatl or Quetzalcoatl even after the flood, for he was called Quetzalcoatl or Quetzalcoatl by them. Centuries upon centuries later, when the early Catholic monks entered this land, they found that a portion of the eternal story was already a part of this culture. In time, the two versions became fused, so that there are literally hundreds of legends relating to the god Quetzalcoatl. He would have come by sea in a great golden ship, according to the stories told about him. Since Pisidia was close to that which is now known as Bimini, it would have been a comparatively short journey from Pisidia to Yucatan. He came and brought truth to them, and then he left and returned to his homeland. Because a portion of Yucatan was then beneath the sea, it may have been that he came to Chichen Itza, or else to Uxmal. Archaeologists denote Champoton, on the present coastline, as the site of the Itza people who later settled and gave their name to Chichen Itza. It would seem that the purpose of the AMILIUS entity, who became Adam, Ram, and others in the Atlantean embodiments, was to bring the truths of his people into other cultures, so that when Atlantis went into the sea, at least, there would be some remnant of that fair land, within the hearts and memory of other races. When Edgar Cayce was asked about great religions where neither Jesus nor Mary were actual participants, he gave that these spiritual leaders were overshadowed by the Christ. Since Mary, herself, brought the principle of twin souls into Atlantis, it would seem that she overshadowed those of the Oriental culture who presented the Yin-Yang Principle. In the Tao of Lao Tzu, we read, "The spirit of the valley never dies. It is called the mystic woman. The gate of the mystic woman is the foot of heaven and earth. Before the heavens and earth existed, there was something nebulous, silent, isolated, standing alone, changing not, eternally revolving without fail, and yet worthy to be called the mother of all things." The Yin-Yang Principle, that male and female are forever interwoven, one non-existent without the other, was first given to the world by the AMILIUS Principle. If it is correct that AMILIUS separated into the 5 races, simultaneously, becoming Adam and the earth. If it is also a truth that AMILIUS, the feminine principle, the twin soul of AMILIUS, separated into the 5 races, then there must have been 5 gardens of Eden. AMILIUS and Amelia became the Adam and Eve in the Atlantean garden. It is this portion of the soul which has attained Christhood. Again, let us think of an apple, cut in half. The twin soul. The first division, eternally one, eternally of the same nature. Then let us think of the apple being sliced or separated into 4 other portions simultaneously, and these 4 portions separate. These 2 are what Edgar Cayce chose to call other portions of the same entity. Twin souls. In this sense, the complete soul of AMILIUS would be a composite soul of the 5 or 10. Thus, the 5 Eves in the earth would have, as their sole purpose, the obligation to teach of those things which relate to the eternal masculine and feminine. The alter ego, the twin soul. Perhaps, a lesser Eve may have incarnated as Lao Tzu in a masculine vehicle to bring forth these principles. We cannot read the Tao without awareness that it embodies the earliest and most sacred teachings of Atlantis. From the Gospel of Lao Tzu, we read, "Birth is not a beginning. Death is not an end. There is birth. There is death. There is issuing forth. There is entering in. That through which one passes in and out without seeing its form, that is the portal of God." Again, we read, "The perfect man shall be a spiritual being. Were the ocean, itself, scorched up, he would not feel hot. Were the great rivers frozen, he would not feel cold. Were the mountains to be cleft by thunder, and the great deep to be thrown up by storm, he would not tremble with fear. Thus, he would mount upon the clouds of heaven, and driving the sun and the moon before him, pass beyond the uttermost limits of worldly existence." Chuang Tzu, the disciple who interpreted the philosophy of Lao Tzu, was, perhaps, even closer to the feminine principle in the earth when he wrote, "I, who say you are a dream, am but a dream, myself. Life is the companion of death, and death is the beginning of life. Those who dream of the banquet may wake to lamentation and sorrow. Those who dream of lamentation and sorrow may wake to joy. While man dreams, he does not know that he is dreaming. Only when he wakes will he know it was a dream. By and by will come the great awakening, when we shall find that all of life was but a great dream." When Edgar Cayce was asked if Jesus had sought embodiment in France, England, America, he answered by saying, "Rather, these have been as the Spirit of the Christ, or the Master walked among men. For whether among the priest, as it were, in France, or among the lowly monk in England, or the warrior bold in America, the Spirit existed, that God is one." Since Jesus and Mary were the final incarnation in the earth of the original AMILIUS Amelia, again Edgar Cayce is speaking of the overshadowing of the Christ Spirit. In other readings, he suggests that the biblical 144,000, as referred to by St. John, the Beloved, was an actual group of teacher souls, for lack of a better word, who entered the earth. Again, since AMILIUS was the pattern, there must have been the same type of separation. Each soul, then, would have been a composite soul which divided, as did AMILIUS and Amelia. However, since all souls were created in the beginning, some became inhabitants of the earth before others. God is no respecter of persons, and each soul in the earth is, eternally, a part of him and a portion of the Christ. Edgar Cayce pinpointed the entry into the 5 races at several places in the world. Gobi, the Carpathias, the Andes, the western plain of what is now known as America, and, of course, Atlantis. He explained that the variations in the color of the skin, or pigmentation, related to the climate of each place, and therefore, had nothing to do with the development of the soul. Again, we have lived in every race, probably not once, but many times. Although we retain the same polarity throughout the ages, there are instances when a soul which is feminine may choose to enter into the masculine vehicle, or when the masculine polarity may wish to enter into the feminine vehicle. However, the polarity remains the same. The color of one's skin is for a lifetime or for a series of lifetime. Even sex is not an eternal attribute of the soul, since, in the beginning, we were androgynous beings. Of the oneness of all creation, Edgar Cayce once gave, "All things are one. We are one with a turtle, a rock, a blade of grass, each other, and God. All things are one with and of a part of God. Life is a continuous thing, and an individual is each day meeting his own self, either in the mental, the material, or the spiritual phase of his existence. Know first and foremost that the Lord thy God is one. Then know too that thyself is one, thy ego and thy I am. Choose each day whom you will serve, and by the records in time and space, as we have moved through the realms of his kingdom, we have left our mark upon same. By drawing nigh unto the Father God within, ye may become more and more aware of thy purposes for being here. For his promise is to bring to thy remembrance all things from the foundations of the earth. The story, then, of Amelia and AMILIUS who became Mary and Jesus is the story of our journey throughout the earth. They have taken the road ahead of us. They have pointed out the rough places which we may trod. They have brought the eternal principles into manifestation. Again, at some time, perhaps millenniums hence, each Adam, each Eve, will journey into other planetary systems, and the sorrows of earth will be long forgotten. Death is a resting place for the soul. A time of recreating, of remembering past lives, of partaking of the spiritual nature, even of life in a far more beautiful sphere than we know upon earth. Only, this morning, when I bought a book relating to the things of the spirit on a magazine stand, the clerk told me about his experience under sodium pentothal. He said that he found himself out of the body, in a world of music and love, and children and adults were living together in happy gardens. His experience lasted but for 5 minutes, but that he will never forget those moments outside of the body. For us, as with Mary and Jesus, the Spirit stands eternally before the throne of the Father, and in this sense, all of life is but a dream. In reality, we have never left the kingdom of the Father, and it is at the moment that the journey, here on earth, seems the most difficult that we are the closest to Him. Whatever the problem we face, it has been created by self, whether in the present or in a past incarnation. And, as Jesus and Mary, we shall one day put aside the garment of earthly embodiment and return home. The beautiful one. AMILIUS, the masculine polarity. Amelia, the feminine polarity. Adam, Atlantean, of the Garden of Eden, before the flood. Eve, Atlantean, of the Garden of Eden. Ram, who become Rama, of Atlantis, he entered India, before the flood. Sita, native Indian wife of Rama. The first Krishna, before the flood. An overshadowing. The feminine portion remained out of the body, acting as a guardian. Hermes, the Nubian, who entered Egypt, before the flood. Mara, the Black Madonna, mother of Hermes who died early. Seshet, Egyptian wife of Hermes. Subsequent incarnation after Mara. Enoch, writer of that book most used by the Essenes, as found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Anna, wife of Enoch. Melchizedek, after the flood, the greatest mystic of any age, except the Christ. An overshadowing. A guardian. Out of the body. Joseph, son of Jacob and Rachel, who became a prince of the house of Egypt, after he was sold into Egypt by his stepbrothers. Asenath, the Egyptian princess. Wife of Joseph. Mother of Ephraim and Manasseh. Cons, the young Egyptian prince, who entered the body to carry on the work of himself as Hermes, the Nubian. Cons became best known in the Ptolemaic period, which was centuries after his birth. The legends of his healings would have been existent as early as the final writing of the Book of the Dead. The little princess, healed by Cons. This was an embodiment when these two knew each other only in the out-of-body state. In deep sleep. Nevertheless, the Mary portion was healed through the double of Cons. The second Krishna. Krishna, of the Bhagavad Gita. The beloved one of India. Radha, young wife of Krishna who left the body at an early age. Son of the sun, Pharaoh of Egypt. Son of Akhenaten and Nefertiti, this was a life chosen by him, so that one day the world would awaken to the glory that once was Egypt. Makatun or Makatatan, sister of Tut-Ankhetun, who died in her 11th year. Overshadowing her brother in spirit. Joshua, who with Moses, led the Hebrews out of the land of Egypt. Joshua was meeting the karmic pattern of Ram, who entered a country not his own. And of Joseph, who was too sold in chains into Egypt by his brothers. As Joseph, he created a portion of the karmic pattern that led to Joshua. Miriam, the much younger sister of Joshua, who, as Miriam, the much older sister of Moses, was a prophetess and a sweet singer of songs. She danced before the Lord at the celebration of their entry into Canaan, the land of promise. Miriam, Moses' sister, and Aaron and Moses were long dead. Asaph, the leader of the choir and composer at the court of David. After difficulties with Absalom, the son of David, Asaph left the court to become the first teacher of righteousness. He who was crucified. Thus following through on the mystery schools begun by Melchizedek. Sarah or Serapha, beloved wife of Asaph and mother of 9 sons. A musician, very unusual for a woman of that time. The first woman of the school of the Essenes. After the death of her martyred husband, she lived in the community with her sons. As with Miriam, she was a sweet singer of songs, and one who excelled in the lyre and harp. Zend, father of Zoroaster, son of Alged, who had been Rata Edgar Cayce, husband of Zara of the city of the hills and plains in Persia. Zara, the beloved wife of Zend. His only wife and mother of Zoroaster. The exquisite portrait in the Church of Guadalupe in Mexico of the lady would seem to have been Mary in her embodiment as Zara. The vision of this lady dark of countenance was seen by Juan Diego. Jeshua Isaiah, who wrote the scriptures called Deuterolsea. Maria, the sorrowing mother of Jeshua, a wife who had been refused. Jeshua, called Jesus, Isias, by the Greeks. He who became the Christ. Of virgin birth, crucified, resurrected. The Avatar. Savior of the world. Mary, the beloved mother and twin soul of Jeshua Jesus throughout the ages. The Beautiful One. An allegorical story of the beginning of time. Perhaps, children are closer to the hidden mysteries than others. It is only recently that they have left the realm of the stars to take abode in the earth. As a child, I had a strange dream that came again and again. It related to the beginning of time. In the years that I taught at the John Brown School in Beverly Hills, many of the children in kindergarten, to my astonishment, shared the dream with me. Because the dream seemed to speak in universal symbology, I began to believe that these were a memory of a time before man entered the earth, when he was a part of the angel kingdom. Once, during a troubled period, I seemed to enter this dream of my childhood in meditation. It was as real, as vivid, as any experience of my life. In the words of the children, whose dreams I recorded, and in the words of the meditation experience, I can express this only as a symbolic story. An allegory of that which was before time began. The boat in the sky. There was a boat in the sky. The boat was of clouds and silver frosting. It partook of the sweetness of the rain, the coolness of the wind. There were hundreds and hundreds, thousands and thousands, of angelic beings. And of these angels, they each knew only happiness. They rode the boat in the sky, or climbed the ladder of the moon. They were two. Not just one. Two within one. Sometimes, they seemed to separate for a moment. Then, they would come together again. They were twins. Or they were one. For they merged into each other. They were neither boy nor girl, yet they were both. Sometimes, they flew, with tiny, fragile-like wings, or without wings. They could cross the mountains of the earth below them. They could sweep into the highest cloud or descend into the depths of the sea. They had been given guardianship of the earth by him, the beautiful one, of whom they were each a part, as a cell within the heart of his being. In this earth, there were animals. Great ones. Small ones. But the angels were not afraid. They could enter into these. They could ride the back of the hippopotamus, or stand on a toe. On tiptoe. On the elephant's back. They could go through the water as if it were the air, or they could ride on the back of the biggest fish, or the smallest. Always, they returned to the beautiful one, he, who was love itself. He, of whom each was a part. Even if their journeys took them to the outermost stars, they returned to him. They entered into him, for they were eternally a part of him, and they could no more separate themselves than they could know of sorrow or pain, hunger or cold, misery or suffering. These things had no awareness within their consciousness. They knew only the happiness of creation, for they, too, were creators. Co-creators with him. As with the most innocent of children, they lived in a world of eternal perception, and no shadow crossed their path. to be winged, to be free, to worship him, the most beautiful of all beings. This was their destiny. They were to guard the earth, for he had given this to them, even though it had been created for the animal beings which inhabited it. When the storms in the earth came, they were joyous, for they would ride at the crest of the storm. The lightning, itself, they could harness. Oh, great and glorious joy! Oh, wonder of wonders! For all things created. And all things are good. Oh, beauty beyond beauty! Oh, indescribable loveliness! Oh, ecstasy upon ecstasy! To live in this eternity, which does not change, which knows not sorrow, which is of the joy of the Spirit. And, as for him, O Lord of Lords, Creator of us all, O beloved, eternal, and holy, of whom we are a part forever and ever. This was the story of the angelic beings. Until one day, it began with a new set upon the face of the beautiful one. What was this set of his face? What could it be? A determination. A determination and a desire to bring even greater good into manifestation. That which was now perfect would become even more perfect. Oh, blessed beloved! What new thing is in store for us? You have given us the heavens, the earth, and all the realms of this solar system. And then, the beautiful one, who was all majesty, all beauty, all glory, turned his face toward that which would be even greater creation. New worlds would be born. New stars would emerge. And he alone, could create them. In an instant, a planet came into being. The morning stars rejoiced. The angels sang their song of oneness with all creation. Then, oh, listen, then there was the sound of rendering. The sound of that which is torn asunder, but with great crying. The worlds came together. The planets merged. The one planet fell from the bright galaxy of the heavens. And with it, in that moment, the first cry of sorrow was born, for the earth and the heavens were clothed in darkness. Oh, where is the beautiful being? The heavens have shaken. The land and the seas have emitted great sounds. We fall. We fall. We fall. From the bright kingdom of the heavens we fall. From the boat in the sky, we have fallen. Where are we? What is this darkness that envelops us when we have known only light? What is this great aloneness which surrounds us when we have known only you? O Lord, our Lord, where are you? Come from the hiding place. Come from the glorious kingdom, and take us into your arms again. The earth is close upon us. It is a strange and lonely place. Too often have we become a part of the earth elements. Too often have we entered into those that are called animals. We are entrapped, O Lord. No longer can we rise from the back of the elephant. Neither can we leave the waves of the sea. The spirit within us which took us to the farthermost star has departed. We have forgotten that which was joy. We are alone. We are alone. As the cries of each rose even to the heavens, he returned. The beautiful one. But he, too, who had known but joy, now knew sorrow. He, too, who had never been alone, was now alone. He, too, who had been all of love was now even greater love because of the sorrow within his heart. For he had chosen to return that these, who were his, would not be entirely separate. No longer would their eyes to the stars. No longer would they wend their way through the heavens. There was to be a new cycle. For joy, there would be pain and length of days in the earth. For that which had been perfect, there would be physical form in the earth. True, for a time there would be rest in which was called the ending, or death, but there must be the return. Until the beautiful one, himself, led the way out of chaos. Out of sorrow. Out of bewilderment. Out of all things which hurt the hearts of men. For what could be gained by suffering? What could the answer be? The answer would be a new concept, that which had not been known in the long season of joy. That which was a part of him, now, and for all eternity. That which would be compassion. That which would be understanding of the fellow traveler. That which would, in the end, be greater than even that which the angels knew. That which would be love. The terrors within would, for a time, bring hatred and misunderstanding, but these things, too, were but for a season. An eon? 100 eons? What is time? Those who have lived in timelessness in the boat in the sky, in the sweetness of the rain, in the coolness of the wind, would now know suffering. Only, at rare moments, would the joy return. The beautiful being, himself, would show the way. He would be the first to take up the cross. He would be the last to lay it down. For not one instant would he let those who were eternally his go out from him. They might believe that they were alone, but this was not a truth. The truth, the eternal truth, was that they were closer than hands or feet. They were his. Whether in the greatest darkness or the greatest light, whether with hatred or whether with love, they were his. Eons would pass away. Perhaps, eons upon eons. Until again the morning stars would sing together and they would know him for their own. Then, it would be as if they had put away childish things. The boat in the sky would no longer enclose them. But, once again, as in the beginning, they would know his love. And they would know the wisdom of the heart. A universe would await them, for again, they would be co-creators with God. With greater love. In all ways, they would partake of his love and of his compassion. This is the story that the children told me, and of my own meditation. A story, perhaps, of the beginning, in allegorical form. A story of the ending. But, between the beginning and the ending, there are moments when we reach out to each other, and to him. We are not alone. In the Edgar Cayce readings, there is a statement which troubled me. It is, simply, that in the end, mankind will go farther, even, than the angels. In listening to the dreams of the children, in remembering the dream of my own childhood. It may be that because man, in the earth, must learn compassion he may be able to climb even higher than those who did not become entrapped in the earth. If it is true that some portion of ourselves is ever before the throne of the Father, watching, waiting, rejoicing when we say the kindly word, control the moment of wrath, meet each day with forbearance, forgiveness, long-suffering. Then, surely, one day, we shall find, perhaps, that we are completely his. We, too, will have learned the wisdom of his great and compassionate heart. For if he were the one who once failed, and I cannot say that he failed, then, he is the one who will lead us back into eternity. Perhaps, as Edgar Cayce has given, we shall be a little more than the angels. Each of us will, in the end, traverse the same road. We shall not, again, be children of the Spirit, those who ride the boat in the sky. We shall, with understanding, with compassion, find our way into his kingdom. That which was lost will be found, again, and it will be far greater than that which first we knew. In an Edgar Cayce reading he gave, how glorious the knowledge of his presence should awaken in the hearts of you, for he is lonely without thee. For he has called each of you by name. Will ye fail him now? Do good that he may abide in you. And know that he is alive in thee, wilt thou but love one another, as he has loved you. Know the Lord is nigh, nigh unto thee. Fare ye in the way that brings peace, harmony. Make peace with thyself, thy Lord, thy Christ, thy brother. Love one another.